50 people on. I can't see all your faces, but hope everybody's doing okay. One thing I'll make a note of is that we have a notes doc. Put it in the chat here. So for presenters, you know, if you want people to have links to your projects, I'm happy to fill them in where I can, but would love anything that you want to share on them, GitHub repos, putting that in this like agenda area relative to your projects. I've already linked the Brigade project index. Yeah, and then so just in terms of like quick agenda, you can open the doc and see that too, but we'll have, Bonnie is going to take us through the Brigade project index. We'll have presentations from Hack for LA, Code for Tulsa, Code for Pittsburgh, and then a bit longer on EITC and the partner enablement team, and then a good conversation about ethical project sourcing. So each presenter is going to have a couple minutes to talk about the project, and then ideally we're going to be looking at the chat here and taking questions. So yeah, if you have questions for the folks as they present, put them here. We will try to see them. That's me and Veronica, but if you are missing anything or your question doesn't get asked, just ping us on Slack or other ways. So yep, and then a reminder to use the chat, asynchronous, good if you don't need to ask a question. Otherwise, we'll mostly have people on mute. So to kick things off, we're going to have Bonnie talk about the Brigade project index, which folks have been working on for a while. And I will kick it over to you.
Hi. Well, thanks for showing up. Wow, this is quite a turnout. So Carlos from Code for Tulsa is going to be my demo partner today. And I'm hopefully going to show you the shortest demo of any product you've ever seen. So our process. So Carlos, if you wouldn't mind sharing your screen, that'd be great.
Yeah. What do you want me to go to? The my GitHub?
I do.
All right.
So I'll give a little preface while Carlos is doing that. This works great if you are either the owner of the repo, like you're one of the admins of your Brigade's organization, GitHub organization, or if you're the admin of the specific project. So we're now on the Code for Tulsa repository. And as you can see where you see Snap Screener, we have a couple of blue tags that say SNAP, Food Security, Code for America, Code for Tulsa, Civic Tech Index, and Social Safety Net. We're going to show you how easy it is to add tags like that to your other repositories and why that's valuable. So Carlos, which repository do you want to add next?
Let's add, I was looking for the newest court. Yeah, this is the newest court bot. Let's add that one.
Okay, great. So Carlos can click on the repository, and then you'll notice at the top it says this is an experimental implementation of our court bot using Python. And obviously he could make that description longer, so it would be easier for people to understand more about the project, as well as having a URL if there's a URL to go to, and he could do all that through the edit button. Right below the, and thank you, Carlos, for doing that. So you see it has a place for the website, etc. But right below that implementation, go ahead and click cancel on that, Carlos.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Right below that, it says Manage Topics. Go ahead and click on that. So now, Carlos can add some very basic tags. So the first one will be Code for Tulsa. Oh, dashes, please. Perfect. And now Code for America. Oops. Yep. You can just do one right after the other. So just remember, no spaces, only dashes where spaces normally would be. And then another one would be Civic Tech Index. And I'm going to explain the breakdown of each of those. Yep, perfect. That one, no spaces. Excellent. And then what's this project about?
So I'll put court reminder and criminal justice.
And how about CourtBot, since that's how people are generally looking for this?
Yeah, there we go.
Is there any other good suggestions down below? No, looks like we're good. Oh, CourtBot Python. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, there we
People
go.
might be looking for a Python
It's a
version.
great Twilio project too. So
Well, does it have Twilio in it?
yeah, this one still does. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, you're all done. Great. So now why this is valuable is that there is a way to search the index for any product. You can search any GitHub repository for these tags. So for instance, oh, I showcased this in the channel. Hold on one sec. Let me find the link. Not 100% ready for this, obviously. GitHub repository. One sec. It was going so good up until that point. Search.
I've added in links to the Brigade project index in this notes doc here, as well as some
I don't know if there's an
documentation.
easy way to search the index there. I haven't looked at what you put. Let's see. I do not have a quick link for that. I am really sorry. Can I circle back at the end of this meeting so we can move on? I don't want to mess up the timing, Veronica.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Carlos.
Yeah, no problem.
So as Bonnie will share in the chat and or hopefully both as well in the Google Doc that we have it going in the chat here. Anybody's welcome to add to this, but this statusboard.brigade.cloud link is where you can see like the live version of the index of what we're talking about here and why tagging projects is important. We're pretty good on time here. Do we feel okay to move, Veronica? Do we get any questions?
Well, do you think it's possible to maybe share your screen just to show people the index while we have everyone's attention real quick?
I think the thing about what M's going to show though is like another level beyond what my presentation is about. So it's not actually a fair representation of the entire index. So that's why I'd prefer to wait until I can get you guys the right link. Because that's a deeper, like, that's a project that's ongoing for a long period of time versus what's available right now.
Okay, that's
So if
fine.
you could just wait, thanks.
Sure. Yeah, we can move forward, Em.
All right. So next up, do we have anything else on Brigade Project Index? We're good. We'll come back in the notes.
Yeah, thanks.
Cool. Also, just dovetailing right back into there, we've got Hack for LA, also Bonnie, but also others from Hack for LA, presenting for, we have 10 minutes here, so maybe for about 5+ questions on their Food Oasis project.
Okay, I'm going to bring up my screen for this, but Liza Garrison is going to do the voiceover, so to speak. So I'll share my screen. There we go. You guys able to see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Liza, take it away.
Okay, so I guess preface this. This is like my third day on this project, so Bonnie's going to keep me honest. But basically, the background of this project in 2016, Hack for LA launched Food Oasis, and the goal of the website was to basically provide a resource for food insecure people to find fresh food and healthy resources, like farmers markets, community gardens. Resource was designed to be managed by a nonprofit once launched, but it turned out to be way more work than a nonprofit could handle. And the resources became out of date, but even though they were out of date, a lot of social workers are still using this resource throughout LA. So proof of concept is there. So then in August of 2019, a new team at Hack for LA started refreshing and reimagining the project with the goal of making it self-sustainable. So transitioning to our new plan, our mission is to create a verified, updated database of food pantries and soup kitchens for people of Los Angeles County. So we're partnering with nonprofits, government agencies, and individuals to update from the current 350 listings to the 2,000 and more records available today. We're doing this through a combination of calls, emails, and building an interface for stakeholders of all types. So the first step that we took is we first mapped the ecosystem of the stakeholder food rescue ecosystem. So what this is basically these are different entities that are categorized by outlets, connectors, and it's basically just how, like, the goal of getting all of the food to the recipient. But these are all the major players that are involved in that. Then once we have the ecosystem mapped out, we then went on to design the system. And so this process design was like what we intended to do when we kicked off the process, but it didn't exactly work that way, is my understanding.
That's a good summation of that. We're iterating as we go.
Yeah. So looking forward, our major milestones are to reboot the existing website and its search functionality, to scrape every existing website with pantry and hot meal listings and validate them, create an authoritative list based on those validated records and make it available as a data set, and then create an API for placement so that any government or community website can access it and update and iterate from the Food Oasis LA website. So the team that took this on, we basically had three main teams. We had a web development team, the mapping team, which is also kind of part of the web development team, and a design team. You can see that we included a lot of details about the exact tech tools that were used by each team, but generally, the web development team is obviously in charge of re-architecting the FOLA website. Yeah. So in terms of our current status, we're still defining functions and features to create an MVP of community contributions. So on the right hand side of the screen, you'll see this is the current website, which is the non-updated website. So even though the redesigned docs for the general user face were completed, they haven't been pushed through to the front end, but they're going to soon. In terms of existing work that needs to be done, stakeholders can't claim their listings, and the community can't suggest edits. The tiered verification system is just getting started, but admins have the ability to edit stakeholder data in real time without deploying the entire site, which is a big win. These are some of the main partners that we worked with, and in the little call out, the blue call outs, those are the contributions that each of them gave. And finally, this is the team. So our partner relationship management is handled by Jenny. Bonnie is our guru. John is our technical architect. And I just joined the team, and I'm taking on a project management and UX role.
Yeah, and I want to say here that that Jenny is like the outsized contributor to this project. She lives and breathes this project, and almost all of the relationships that we have on the previous page were created by Jenny when she was doing her ecosystem mapping. And it is no small thing to kind of really get up to speed in the space enough that people will start investing in you. And she's made that happen through her empathy and persistence and patience.
Yeah, these are just links to all the resources. So the Food Oasis LA site as it stands, our GitHub, and Figma for desktop and mobile versions. Okay, so in order to do this in your own community, the first step is to perform some outreach. So learn about who already is in the space and go about it in a gentle way so you don't make any enemies. Then you're going to develop web scrapers to scrape all of the websites with local listings based on terms that you want to include. Then you'll validate that scraped list, and then reach out to Hack for LA, because hopefully we will be well beyond and we'll be able to give you the code that we've developed.
Yeah, the idea is that we're pressing pretty hard on making it possible for community stakeholders to update their data. at various levels of authentication and authorization. So if you get the hard work done of finding all of the listings, validating them is the next big hurdle, and that's where the code's going to come in. So we love to do cross-brigade projects, so we can deliver faster to food insecure population and help us make the code usable. So anybody who's interested in contributing to code, please come and talk to us, or if you just want to get started with the process and want some advice. Okay. And then go ahead.
Yeah, these are just some additional things to keep in mind. Obviously, your city and nonprofit structure is going to be unique. A lot of this is a lot of personal touch, and so there is no really good way to automate the personal connections that we have to make, so it is very reliant on that. And you're basically, like any business, you have to maintain some kind of market relevancy to receive funding and to continue to receive funding.
That's the call-a-thon that's actually happening right now today, which Wes I think you were in it before. Did you jump out to join us?
No, I was the last one.
Yeah.
We have a couple questions and comments coming in through the chat and the Q&A. One, what's the long-term maintenance goal? Is it to transfer ownership to stakeholders? That's from Matt.
Yes. No, the long-term goal is not to transition it to stakeholders. We tried that once and it didn't work. The listings went out of date and they couldn't maintain the code base. Software, as pretty much I think everybody on this call probably knows, needs constant tending and maintenance. Software used to be standalone, but now it's full of dependencies and libraries. So somebody needs to maintain that, and Hack4LA is committed to that maintenance, but also to iterating as we learn about how people use the product. So the idea with our relationships with stakeholders is to create an interface where they can interact with it, and then to create a widget that they will eventually put on their website. So instead of recreating the list on their website, of which there are hundreds of websites all over Los Angeles with food pantries, all of those lists are incomplete. And so they're creating a lot of noise in the ecosystem of people finding food. So the idea is if everybody uses the same data set, and they're contributing to it and making it more complete, and then they use the same widget for searching, they can still service their constituency without polluting the data stream. And then also we'll be planning to make the data stream, available through an API. So there'll be a constantly updated data.
Thank you. We also have, it looks like maybe Victoria from DC, not a question, but you should check that out in the chat. And then Sierra is saying, and I've seen this too here, that it's like farms that normally deliver to restaurants are going direct to consumer. Have you thought about, or is there any way to connect food banks with those farms?
Yeah, that's already happening, and that is happening like through the LA Regional Food Bank. But there's also products. There's also one of our partners on the partners list was Food Forward, and they actually go and glean the fields. They found that instead of asking people to donate produce to food pantries, it was easier and more productive to actually get people to donate time to go glean fields, and then they could do pallets of food. So that's already happening through our partners, which is again why you need to map the ecospace, because a lot of times what you think might be a good idea to do is probably already being addressed, especially in a city as big as LA.
For sure. Okay. Thank you, all of you, for presenting that. Again, another pitch for the Google Doc, which was shared in the chat a little while ago. We are going to try to use the Q&A for asking questions. So we got one more. How do people who need to find food get to the website or find out about it?
Yeah, right now the current website, foodoasis.la, is, like I said, has listings, has 350 of them. They're not very up to date. And so, because we're in the process of validating data now, but that's how people would interact with the database. It also doesn't have all the new front end widget for searching, so it's a little hard.
Great. Do you have any plans for future iterations to incorporate text message based communication?
Yeah, we're really interested in using Twilio, but we got, after some initial research, it looks like there's a 1% response rate from stakeholders when you ask them to do their updates via text chat or chat bot, whereas the personal touch of calling them seems to result in a pretty significantly high response rate. So yes, we are going to utilize all the technologies that we can that will be effective within whatever budget that we're able to put together.
Great. Veronica, how are we doing on time?
I think it's about time that we move to the next presentation, and we can answer any further questions via the chat, but please make sure to submit them to the Q&A so that we can make sure to log all of the answers that we have.
Great. Okay, so next up we'll go to Carlos from Code for Tulsa. And Carlos, you're muted. Yeah, there we go.
So yeah, the project that we are getting ready to launch here is a screener for the food stamp program for SNAP. And first I want to say thanks to all the volunteers. There were tons of people who worked on this for a very long time. The idea came about in the summer of 2018. The project was officially launched a year ago, and we're finally at the point where we're ready to kick this thing off for real. So I'm very, very excited about it. The pilot that I'll demo here for you guys is a partnership between Hunger Free Oklahoma, who's a nonprofit. Their biggest mission is food security. Tulsa Public Schools, obviously us, Code for Tulsa, and the Department of Human Services. So if you don't know about SNAP already, it used to be called the Food Stamp Program, and it's administered by the USDA. And the way the program works is the USDA basically sends out a check to every state, and the state is responsible for administering SNAP in their own state. So for example, in the state of Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Department of Human Services is responsible for administering the SNAP program. So each state has its own SNAP program, and the way you apply for SNAP is that you have to apply in the state where you live. So it makes things a little bit complicated because every state has to develop their own applications and their own rules for eligibility and all that type of stuff. So if you're really super interested in the nerdy part of the policy, there's a link in the slide deck that I added to the notes doc where you can look at all those resources about eligibility. So we had to do all that homework. I don't know why it says loading. Come on now. Work. Can I just go on to the next slide? All right. So the previous slide just talked about the importance of food stamps right now. If you didn't see the Code for America tweet, there's this eye-popping graph about how many food stamp applications that have been submitted in the state of California. It went from, just under 2,000-ish to 9,353 in the last, couple weeks. So, so it's really important work. And so I'm just excited that it's pretty timely that we're launching this right now. So as far as this specific screener, what it does is it asks you a few simple questions, enough that we can do the math in JavaScript to determine that you're likely eligible or likely ineligible for SNAP. And then the script does two things. It mails off the family's responses to the agency. In this case, the agency is Tulsa Public Schools. And then it provides a results page that actually has the person's contact information that will be in touch with you if you choose to apply for SNAP. Or if you're ineligible, that person would also guide you to some food resources that you can access even if you're ineligible for SNAP. So there's actually kind of a hand-holding process at the end. And I can quickly walk you through the form. So I have one child, there's 2 adults, nobody over the age of 60 in my home. I make $1,000 every month. And it just asks for some simple contact info. And it has me select the school that my child goes to, since again, this is a partnership with TPS, with Tulsa Public Schools. I'm just gonna select test school here. And it's gonna tell me that I may be eligible for food assistance. And it gives me the contact information at that school. So I know there's a human being on the other end that's gonna walk me through this process. If I wanted to, I could go over here and just apply online on my own. We felt it was really important to have sort of a human being on the other end of the process. So if you want to test it out for yourself, you can see the demo. We have our GitHub repo there. You can fork this project if you so desire. What's really cool about this is the back end of the screener, all the contact information for the agencies is run by a Google Sheet. So that agency can very quickly and easily update contacts as they change. And they don't have to learn any software or know any programming or know anything. They just, if they can edit a spreadsheet, they can edit this. So as far as what we want to do next, this screener is very, very specifically built for Hunger Free Oklahoma and Tulsa Public Schools. So what we want to do is basically make a more generic version that would be available to anyone in the state of Oklahoma. And in order to do that, we would need to sort of take off that agency part and just give you a yes or no. You know, you may be eligible or you may not be eligible. So obviously, in order to kind of ramp up, we need some better documentation. That's number one. Number two, like I said, we're sort of looking at building 2 versions of this screener. One that's the current version that we have, and another one that's sort of, I don't know, a Snap Screener Lite version that doesn't have the agency component. And the third thing, I have started a conversation with 18F, and they have actually been working on an API for SNAP eligibility for all 50 states. They're not quite done. So we're building as they're building, but ultimately what would be super exciting would be to integrate that with 18F's API so that we can sort of build the front end and then integrate it with 18F's back end, and all the eligibility information for all 50 states would be available. You would just need to fork the project, hook it into 18F's API, and away you go. So that's the dream, and that's what we got.
That's a very good dream. We only have time for about one question, but we didn't get, I'm not seeing any questions in yet. If people have specific things to ask, we should. This is a great project, and we'll put some stuff in the notes. Carlos already added some good links in the notes doc, so you can follow along there. Anything else? Okay, we now have code for Pittsburgh.
Okay, thanks. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Cool. So I'm going to take a different route here to talk about the project I've been working on for about a month now. So I'm Melinda Angeles. I am co-lead for Code for Pittsburgh, but I'm also I also work for Allegheny County in their Department of Information and Technology, specifically the GIS team. So I do all their mapping. So this project actually came across my lap as an employee for Allegheny County, but I also recruited people from Code for Pittsburgh to help out with it. So I'm going to tell you about the structure and how you can bring it to your own brigade if possible. Just a little, I just wanted to talk about this picture right now that I have in this opening header. And this shows all of the cars for the special distribution of free food from the Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank that just happened last Friday. There was over 1,000 cars. I think it's like 1,300 cars that were waiting in line. And so this project is really to showcase and amplify these type of distribution, emergency distribution, food distribution resources available in our area. So basically everyone knows that food access in today's environment is really hard to come by, and there's a lot more people who need food, and the environment keeps changing on who has available food because for instance, one place might have cases of the coronavirus, so they had to close down and they had to move, and a lot of organizations have been just sticking with like static PDFs and emailing them out, or like just posting a static image. And so DHS, the Department of Human Services, asked me if there was a different way for us to create some sort of repository of updated information in a map. Because I've done something very similar to that for the Census Complete Count Committee, and so they just wanted to replicate that sort of thing for food resources. So what was important was creating some sort of solution that also introduces crowdsourcing elements so that people from the public could also participate and submit locations and also update locations as soon as there are new times available or if a location had moved. So I just wanted to emphasize that this project, I know I had said it several times, but this is not the Code for Pittsburgh's food access map that we actually had for a few months now. Those are for food availability for non-emergency locations, and we have been working on it for a while. So I'm gonna just talk about the one that I've been working with for Allegheny County, specifically for emergency food. So the timeline was really simple. When they assigned it to me, it was basically the day after Tom Wolf had asked everyone who was non-essential to work from home. So when that happened, it was the week of March 16th. So the next day on March 17th, I was presented with this project from DHS to create a tool. And honestly, I created a front-end tool that used crowdsourcing information. I think within a day. I think I had it ready for them by the end of the day. But a few days went by where we were talking about feedback and talking with the marketing people to see if it was okay. And also making sure that nothing like this exists, because we would much rather help something that is already working versus creating another competing resource for the public to use. So we finally launched it on just that Saturday. With about 100 locations, and then I had spent the day basically publicizing on all the social media and news outlets that I could. So the, Code for America, Code for Pittsburgh, all that stuff. Facebook, I found all these Facebook group pages specifically for quarantine or Allegheny County resources, and I had basically been posting, like, if anyone asked, like, oh, is there any food distribution sites around me, I would just post a link to this. And then at a certain point later that day, other people had posted it before I even got to reply. So I figured it was working to just post it. And then the next day I had a meetup for Code for Pittsburgh, where basically, and this is going back to Liza or Lisa's presentation, where we were basically just were calling people. So I had partnered with my the volunteer organization that I volunteer at, 412 Food Rescue, and they actually have like partners with hundreds of organizations that could possibly be distributing food. And so it was a lot of cold calling for that day to figure out whether or not it was, they should be on this map, and also to tell them that this map existed. So basically that was the first week of this. And then ever since then, this application had been used pretty well, I guess. I see analytics that there are thousands of views each day, and I've seen it advertised in different things and different news articles and stuff. And also I had modified the tool since then to include more aspects that we weren't aware of initially when I created the tool. And we had developed more partnerships with our local community. So currently the application showcases over 700 locations, including the 11 surrounding counties around Allegheny County. And a lot of these locations are updated several times a day. We have a few people on staff at DHS that that make sure to look at like some of our partners, the Pittsburgh Public Schools, to make sure that all of that is updated, like all the biggies. And then we have some that are semi-automatically updated from the Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank. We're still working on with them to try to get it more up to date. It's an ongoing process. We're constantly changing the interface of it, the user experience, and trying to figure out this automation, like I said, with the food bank. There's a lot of daily looking at the back end to see what people had submitted, embedding it, and accepting it or not accepting it, and also like manually calling and removing and modifying the sites. So that's what it is right now. I am basically working on this project for the majority of my time, working for Allegheny County. Like if you look at like my office day, I think I spend half or at least more than half of my time at work at Allegheny County just working on this food mapping to make sure it's up to date. And I recently had a conversation with the city of Pittsburgh to possibly have them use our API so that it can be integrated into a text messaging system for people who maybe can't access the map, but then can text possibly the word food and their zip code, and maybe have a listing of all of like the food resources near them. And also a personal project of mine, because I know that this interface sucks. I do want to create a mobile friendly interface, which I will show you, and then you'll see what I mean. It's good for now, but it could be better. We're trying to create more partnerships with Big Bird, for example, which specifically pulls out resources for the homeless population. And I'm also in talks with the state of Pennsylvania to possibly make this resource available for the whole state. And you'll see currently anyone, like the whole state can be part of it, but then it's also making sure that people across the state know that this tool exists. Right now, it's really just the southwestern area of Pennsylvania that uses this. And also Waze had reached out about us providing our data sources so that Waze can integrate it within their mapping system. So here's the link to it. It's a really long, ugly link, but I created a tiny URL so it's easier to find. And you can see, like, it's not my favorite interface, but it'll do for right now. It's separated by the ages. I don't know if you can see that because Zoom looks kind of weird on my screen. but I have it separated by age restriction. This is actually funneling from the same feature service, but different filtering based on the population served, except for these grab and go locations, that's specifically from the food bank, and that's why it's separated out. And then I have highlighted the limited time distribution. So like if they only distribute for 1 day, it's highlighted. Let's see. Yeah, all that fun map stuff. There's a way that if you maybe see that there's something wrong, you can make feedback and say like, oh, this is incorrect, and submit it. And then us on the back end could see that feedback and then manually update the data set. And then this tab includes programs that don't have a location. So they're delivery only programs where you have to sign up for them and there's no distribution point. Because some submissions came through there and it was like, oh, where in the map does it belong? So I created that tool. And then the submit a new location tool is how someone can submit a new point for us to vet and accept to be part of the map. And I included some other resources here.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing this.
Oh, yeah, cool. Oh, did I already go over my time?
I think we probably don't have that much more time.
Okay, well, the rest of this shows how you can do it. Definitely, I use ArcGIS Online. They have a free subscription if you want to also use the same stuff. And I can, set up, you just contact me and I could set up like, I don't know, some sort of like webinar or whatever, where I can show you like what I did if you're not familiar with ArcGIS Online. But it's pretty straightforward and easy. And then I have my key takeaways. But yeah, here's my contact information.
Okay, great. Yeah, if you want to put that in the chat and or the Google Doc, then we can make sure that people can follow.
It's linked. I just had a link for my presentation.
Okay, cool. All right, so next we have EITC, the partner enablement team. So Diana from Code for San Jose is going to present.
Great. Let me share my screen. Everyone see that?
Yes.
Cool. So I wanted to talk to everyone today about a team we're putting together to address a really important thing. I'm Diana, last year from Code for San Jose, and this is really something so top of mind with COVID-19. I'm really excited to get everyone involved and to share it with you. So I want to talk about how are low-income workers affected by COVID-19. So this is a photo of the unemployment line in Florida. This is people waiting for hours. So 16.6 million Americans at this point have filed for unemployment. And many of these workers, these are like essential workers who are, out in grocery stores and in warehouses and pharmacies, and they're really struggling to make ends meet. So you think about these low-income workers and, how can the government help with this? I think the government often gets a bad rap. They're either, raising your taxes, you have to pay too much, or they're giving handouts to people who, aren't working. And I think there's actually something really great that the government can do, but oftentimes, it's kind of brought up as something that's not so great. But we're going to talk about that. There is something we can do, and then there's how can you help? So I think this is really about, this is a way to really help low-income workers, and you, Brigade members, volunteers, can actually do a lot to support them. So what is this way that the government can kind of reach out to people and help them? This is the earned income tax credit. So this is something that that workers can actually get. They can get money back in their pockets. I have an example here of Leslie, who earned $10,000 last year working at Safeway as a single mom with a 7-year-old child. And she received a check for $4,779 from the IRS last year from the earned income tax credit. So just to put that in perspective a little bit, that's one of the benefits that people get, and I have SNAP listed here as well. But that's something, all of these different EITC, these credits are something they get in taxes. So by doing their taxes, you're going to get this credit. It's amazing. It's a way that the government can really help people get the money that they need. So it's a really great program. In 2017, it actually, we put $65 billion into 27 million households. That's huge, and that's amazing. That was just 2017. So there's just one small problem, that the EITC has the largest participation gap of any cash support. So while it has this huge potential to help people, there's actually a big gap of people who are just not getting it. They're not able to use it. And that comes to an average of over $1,000 that's left on the table each year per person. And that comes to that's $10.5 billion nationally each year. That's just, people are eligible for it, but they're not getting it. So that leaves us with this question of, why aren't people claiming their earned income tax credit? And there were a lot of insights from the CFA team that I wanted to just share with you, because I think it's a really tough problem. But eligible people, they don't file because they don't think they have to file their taxes. They don't file because emotional hardship interrupted their life. They are overwhelmed by trying to understand the ambiguous and often negative consequences of filing. They don't file because trustworthy, affordable help is hard to find. And they don't file because help isn't available where they are when they need it. So people need tax help that is trustworthy, free, clarifying, thorough, and accessible. And the program that's really kind of doing this right now, that's helping people with their taxes, is VITA. So this is the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, and it's an IRS initiative where they actually have IRS certified volunteers, as you'll see in the picture, helping people navigate this really ambiguous process, and they do a great job, and they have a 93% accuracy rate. So VITA is this perfect opportunity for kind of Code for America to partner with VITA and do something more. This is like the current process. So what VITA will do, where people come in, they bring all their documents, and then there's a VITA volunteer that prepares the tax return, and then goes over it with the tax filer and kind of completes that whole process with them and prepares the tax return. Now, what the challenge is with VITA is that it's just hard to help that many people. You'll see with this flow that there's a lot of in-person interactions. There's a long time of kind of working with people through this process, and it's very inefficient, and it's underutilized. So that's what this 2020 pilot was all about. So Get Your Refund launched. Code for America built this to really help the government deliver this $10.5 billion of flexible cash to the people who need it the most. And we really feel like we can scale this as this critical service. We can scale it nationally. So that's why this partnership began, and this was kind of the vision here, was to have a digital flow where previously it was all kind of in person. A lot of those steps were in person. This is now something that can be completed entirely digitally, makes it so much more accessible. So the client can kind of discover Vita and fill out their intake online. They can do the interview by phone. Somebody on the other end kind of prepares the return. They do their quality review by phone, and then they just sign and file it. And it really allows this to be a fully digital, fully accessible process that's a lot more efficient. So that's kind of the why the pilot happened and what it was trying to achieve. Now, COVID completely threw a wrench in things, and that suddenly all of these in-person sites, these in-person clinics that were so great, closed. That was no longer an option. So now this small pilot kind of, we're getting all this demand for more help and people wanting to have a digital option, because now there's literally no option but this. So that's where Get Your Refund, with the impact of COVID-19, is now more important than ever. And this is also, you might hear about, the stimulus checks and how can we help people with this. Definitely something that with the EITC and with volunteers in this kind of network, we can help people. We can really help them get the money that they need. And so where does that bring us as Brigade members? What we can do is to help scale this effort. So to really do that, we have to really increase our ability to bring on new people onto this digital process. So how can we increase our ability to support partners and then scale this? And I think this is a perfect example of where like Vita and Brigades can work together, because they're both, they both help communities access government benefits, and they're both distributed networks of organizations that are already all across the country. So this is a really great opportunity. So that brings us to what I said at the start. We are forming this partner enablement team, and our mission is to help ensure that every partner of Get Your Refund is set up for success when they launch Get Your Refund to their local clients. So we've been working on building this team for a while, so defining the structure, identifying the opportunities to assist partners, and creating training process necessary so that Brigade folks can jump right in. Some examples of how we've supported partners: so develop training materials, provide technical support, define and optimize processes, lead research projects, and build solutions to partner challenges. We also synthesize product feedback and channel it back to CFA to make the product better for everyone. And all of this is going to help CFA immensely by allowing them to focus more on partner outreach and bringing in more partners, lining them up so that we can get this rolled out more quickly to so many people. So we need you. At the end of the day, we can only move as fast as the people that we have kind of supporting this and moving it forward. So if you have skills around content, UX research, customer support or operations, if you just want to help people, like if you're an empathetic helper, we would love for you to get involved. You absolutely do not need to know anything about taxes. No tax knowledge is actually necessary, but we would love for you to sign up and get involved. Thank you.
Thanks, Diana. We'll drop that link in the doc, and Tom's already put it in the chat as well.
Awesome.
Not seeing any other questions here, but we're like perfectly at time. We got 30 minutes left. Unless I'm missing anything, I think we've got about 30 minutes to talk about ethical project sourcing. That's with Melanie, Greg, and Jess. So I'll turn it over. It looks like Greg stepped away for a second. let's have Jess and Melanie.
Hey there. So I was hoping Greg was going to take the first shift, just because I feel like his material kind of sets up a lot of this conversation. But Melanie, if you have, if you want to jump in as well, otherwise I can sort of share my slides and just start focusing a little bit more on tactical approaches.
Greg just joined us, back with us,
Yay.
teachers.
Great.
Sorry about that. Hello.
Good timing. So I was just saying that you should kick us off
okay.
because I feel like your material kind of frames this conversation really well.
Cool. So just a quick introduction. My name is Greg Bloom. I was one of the founding members of Code for DC. I've worked with Code for Miami since 2012 and with brigades around the country. It's good to see some folks I recognize. I lead the Open Referral Initiative, which may be relevant to Bonnie's work, as well as the project in the projects in LA and Allegheny County. It deals with information about resources. But I was invited to talk today because I've been working over the last couple of years in the follow-up from my experience doing disaster response organizing during Hurricane Irma to a dialogue with community organizers who've had experience with disaster response efforts, most of which were natural disasters like hurricanes and floods. And over the course of several years, in dialogue with a network of organizers stretching all the way back to New Orleans and Hurricane Katrina, Houston, Hurricane Harvey, Puerto Rico, Maria, and Superstorm Sandy, we facilitated a dialogue among organizers from those communities who'd had experiences of suddenly being the center of all this attention of people who want to help, and had common experiences with the sort of mixed blessing that can be all this attention of people who want to help. And over the course of several in-person events and also deliberate advice process where we shared the outputs from those in-person events with networks of organizers, we articulated a set of principles that we hope can guide people who want to help during times like this in thinking strategically about what would constitute an equitable and effective disaster response. And I was talking with Veronica last week about how equity is increasingly a value that the brigades are thinking about. I understand equity meaning in complex social situations, equitable work is work that prioritizes the needs of people who are most in need, right? And allocates more resources and attention to the people who are more impacted and who have more interests at stake. So when we're thinking about equity, when it comes to a situation like this where there's all kinds of crises, even though this is unlike natural disaster, this is a crisis that's affecting all of us. And yet there are still some people who are more impacted than others, right? Who are more at risk, who are more vulnerable. So even though we drafted these principles with an eye towards communities experiencing a sudden natural disaster that's localized, and this is obviously very different, we think these principles might be useful in helping brigades that are jumping in, helping projects that are trying to figure out how to be helpful, potentially avoid some mistakes, and also potentially find a chance at being useful. So I'll walk through some of these principles really quickly. There is an elaboration of them on a Google Doc that's linked from the link that's in the chat. So we've actually gone through and incorporated the perspectives of many organizers to elaborate on these principles. We wanted to keep them really short and sweet so that you could glance at them and get the gist and also dig in if you wanted to. And actually before that in the slides, I guess I could do a screen share. Is that, how do I do that? Let me see. There we go.
Yep. I knew you'd figure it out.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. Is this it? Share. Do you see that? I can't tell what happened. Hello, did I lose y'all?
No, it says that you've started screen sharing, but it's not showing up yet. There we go.
Oh, okay, here we go. Okay, so I made some slides really quickly. Jen Palka actually gave a great example of these principles in action the other week. And again, these principles, if you're applying them well, will more often tell you what not to do than they will tell you what to do. And Jen flagged that, you know, at the beginning of the quarantine time, people were collecting data sets of places where you could get tested for COVID. And Jen posted a very helpful Twitter thread asking people not to make maps of those testing sites. Because as she was explaining, the data didn't necessarily convey whether there was capacity at those testing sites. And if you put it out there, you might send people fruitlessly in the direction of places that aren't equipped to receive them and expose them to risk. So while from an outside, it may seem like, oh, people need to be tested, so we should get data about the testing sites and we should map that data and put it out there and help people find the testing sites. The world is more complex than that. The nuances are not captured by the data. The technology can't quite make the distinction of like, is this actually going to be a trip that helps or potentially hurts someone? So it was a really great frame for the reason why these principles are important to apply before taking action. So really quickly, I'll walk through them. The first principle, this is the basics, is ask and listen. And that might seem really simple and really patronizing, but I've been involved in so many civic hacking projects that are really well-intentioned, but they are imagining what people need. They have not asked what people need. The projects that we've heard today, for the most part, I heard them talking about how they were approached by community organizations. They're working in partnership with community organizations. Presumably, they are asking what those community organizations need, and I think that's a good sign. And it's really important that this be something that's applied at the start and also ongoing as a principle. Here's one example in terms of like, who should you ask? This is a concept from Susan Silkenberry Goldman, really designed in terms of like personal crisis, but we think it's really helpful in terms of any kind of crisis. The ring theory assumes that the person or people who are most impacted are at the center of a set of concentric circles. And each layer of that set of concentric circles is like the people who are closest to them and the people who are closest to them. So the person who's most impacted is at the center. The person who's in crisis, their family or their partners are the next layer. The people who help them are the layer after that. And so on, right? And so the ring theory helps us think about who's most impacted, who should be asking for help, and who should be listening for that help. And if you're farther out in the rings, you should be offering support inwards. And if you don't have access to the person who's most in crisis, you can ask their family, you can ask the people who are organizing alongside them. So thinking about who should be asked in this moment of crisis before you assume what should be done is a really important practice. Next principle is
we're actually going to have to link to the slides.
Okay.
But bring in Jess and Melanie so that we can have a little bit of like some discussion time.
So I'm super okay to cede a few more minutes to get through the sort of high level principles. I think a lot of what I was going to share is echoed in this. So Greg, if you want to like crank through these, I'm totally okay with that.
That was also the most important principle. I can crank through the rest pretty quickly.
Okay, crank away.
All right, so the next principle is distribute power, which may seem like duh, but this can actually be weirdly tricky. It's like, if you build a website that's supposed to help all kinds of people, but now all those people are dependent on you for whatever function is going on, you've not necessarily distributed power. So the question is, what kinds of strategies are going to make it easier for other people who are in all kinds of places to take action and to solve their own problems? The next principle, this is actually pretty important. This is nuanced. Collaborate strategically with institutions who are doing this kind of work. What we heard from organizers in the field who have experience with crisis response is that a lot of times there are institutions who have resources and have power, and so you have a challenge of figuring out whether to collaborate with them or not, right? Like the military, in times of disaster, like they're going to show up. Do you collaborate with them? Like a lot of people I work with would have some political concerns with collaborating with the military or with the police. So this principle is like, you should collaborate with institutions that to the extent that they are working in the service of your goals of equity and justice. There might be disaster response institutions out there that are not actually well known in communities for working in those communities' best interests. You may be partnering with organizations that may not be acting in the interest of their communities. And this is why it's so important to be asking communities for their perspective. The next principle, seek appropriate solutions. During Irma, we had people deploying volunteers to do rescue and like people were being deployed on jet skis. Like people were like taking jet skis to go rescue people from homes. It was not an appropriate solution for the situation. The next principle is use appropriate technology. To this community's great credit, I almost never hear people talking about blockchain, which is really great. Like that's not appropriate technology, but this is a helpful principle to apply, especially in tandem with the other. Is like, is this technology going to be easy for people to use? You all get this, but not everybody really does. And I can wrap it up there. I think the most important thing is like the application of these principles is as important as the iterative concept of lean product development, right? These are things that you should be doing constantly as you're, and you know, not to be a drag, but the number of problems that technology can help with is actually relatively limited, and the potential for technology to actually cause harm is actually significant. And these principles can help people make sure that they're making decisions that are aligned with the interests of the people they want to help. So there's a lot more context from organizers who've had experience in these situations where people show up wanting to help and may or may not be actually helpful. And I encourage you to read through the document, and I'd be happy to continue the conversation. And Jess, I appreciate the extra few minutes. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. So I'm going to go ahead and take the screen once, sure. Greg, once you're done, or once you've closed out, yeah.
Thanks for that, Greg, that was great.
Yeah, so basically my presentation-ish is what Greg said. Just go read his article, it's really important. Read the principles, I think they're really valuable. My sort of take on this is from a little bit more of a tactical perspective. I'm a content strategist, UX strategist. I do a lot of consulting with nonprofits in that space, and have been working with Open Oakland for the last couple of years, our local brigade here. And I wrote up a piece that the link is here. You can read it later. It's much more tactical, sort of just if you guys, for folks who are actually doing active building of tools and resources, just some basically like usability and core things to address and to think about as you make different technical decisions, messaging, content decisions, etc. I'm not going to go into too much of those details, I think. You can read that stuff, otherwise it just becomes sort of a laundry list of to-dos. A lot of the first couple slides I have are just questions and provocations, I guess, to really encourage folks to think about what does it really mean to offer help and to partner. So as Greg's already mentioned, you know, some of the most impacted communities are already doing work, and when a disaster hits, there are already some infrastructures in place often that are worth reaching out to if that's where if that's a community that you want to be trying to help. So these are just 3 ways that alternative paths rather than spinning something up from scratch. You know, working with something, finding something out there that already exists and joining forces, and finding ways to connect people to the resources that do exist, that maybe they don't have access to or know about. And then of course, money, at the end of the day, it actually does often make a big difference, and can, if we can get money into the hands of the people on the ground who are already connected to these communities and working in these communities, oftentimes that's a much more effective way to help. And again, this is echoes of Greg's share and his article, but just really being willing to sort of show up and then shut up. This is something that I've actually struggled with firsthand as I've tried to get more and more involved in different kinds of projects and build relationships. And at the end of the day, just showing up and being there and listening to what people are telling you and being able to let go of the assumptions that you come to the table with are really, really important. And at the end of the day, that'll actually make whatever you do contribute 100 times more effective. And then for folks who are building things, some of the projects actually that were shared earlier, I think have run into some of this stuff, or grappled with it or solved for it head on, which I think is really helpful. Again, this is just stuff you can read the post I wrote up for details on this stuff. Some of it's common sense, but some of it's really important, and things that we don't think about. And it's especially in disaster, in crisis situations, when things are moving so rapidly and things are changing so rapidly, it's very easy to not take the time to stop and really look at, okay, well, what happens if we do this wrong? I was just chatting with a woman who was working with a group who spun up a crowdsourced map to help people find out which stores were stocking food and cleaning supplies and had stuff in stock. And they ended up having to pull it down because the store owners were asking them to stop, because it was causing run on the stores, and people were hoarding, and it was actually making the supply, it was bleeding the supply more than it was helping. So things like that. It's really important that when things are moving really quickly, that we actually dedicate what little time we do have to asking those questions and really thinking them through. I'm going to sort of shut up now, I think, and I open it up to Melanie. I know you wanted to share a little bit about sort of maybe leading the discussion on projects. I'd be really curious to hear from folks on the call too, around experiences that we've had, where either things that we've struggled with, maybe trying to find who to reach out to, who's the right, who are the right allies. I'm
gonna let Melanie offer to donate her time and write a discourse post instead, but she does have a good question to ask for panelist discussion, and also if anybody else has thoughts in this realm, do the raised hand thing and we can bring you in.
Yeah, so the question I would love to hear more about from our other panelists and from the group is, how should we approach projects that are not employing these principles? How can we kind of either get the project to turn around, or help sort of bring them to a place where they're not at risk of potentially harming someone?
I've talked too much already. I'll just say, like, that's partially why we went through the process of developing these principles through such an intentional network of organizers, so that we could speak as more than just like a couple of people who had some experiences. I had this experience in Irma, and without having a document like this on hand, when I was just like asking people these questions and saying these things, I got back like, well, that's just like your opinion, man. And it's like, it's not just our individual opinion. These were common themes we heard from community after community. So you can point to the document that we have.
So literally sharing the Medium piece is the document you're referencing?
The Medium piece links to a document, and we would welcome feedback about how to make that document more useful. Right now, it's like it's a Google Doc, and maybe it should be a web page or something. I don't know.
Okay. I'm really curious because this comes up with our work and it comes up a lot in the COVID response world. But if anybody else, especially in this group, if you've done that, it's even like a communications challenge of, because they're getting back pats, like, look at all, like, thanks for being someone who comes to the rescue and tries to do something. But even just sharing, if you share that document without context, that can just be very passive aggressive. You want to it's a very fine balance of, great job. And so, if anybody else has experience, I would love to bring that into the conversation, on those conversations. Or we can ask another question.
I'll just jump in and say that I think connecting, being a connector is really valuable. One of the things that I've noticed that I think has been incredibly powerful in the COVID-19 response channel and Slack is just being able to bring projects together that may have commonalities or be working on similar efforts, and making introductions. And you don't have to be part of the project to do that. You don't have to be a brigade member to do it. All it takes is like, hey, did you know about this happening over here? Let me send you both an email and get you guys together. I think that can be really powerful and start conversations that otherwise wouldn't happen, and allow people to leverage each other's work and effort and learnings in a way that I'd love to see more of. I just think there's so much, obviously there's so much in, like, some of this work that's happening is really thoughtful, and there's a lot of process behind it. And I think there's a lot of learnings there that are really important to take advantage of and to iterate on and adapt for other local communities.
I think Bonnie had something to add.
Yeah, I wanted to say that it's actually recently come to my attention that we don't have enough activists inside of our organization. And we realized this when we had, when COVID-19 happened. Food Oasis is the project that does have an activist. Jenny is like super passionate about food insecurity, and any good activist really learns their, the entire marketplace and who the players are before they dive in with offers of help, so that we don't get into the situations that Greg talked about. With COVID-19, we had a lot of well-meaning people. We actually launched a website within a couple of days that had resources. And then the person who was spearheading that project, she works for the mayor's office. She got pulled into a project at the mayor's office. And so it took us a while to get back up to speed. And by the time we were back up to speed, somebody else had taken the resources that we had turned into a website and connected with an organization that was better prepared to handle the long-term maintenance of that. And they had done it. And I was like, great, we don't need to do it. Okay, now what are we going to do? And there was a lot of just like navel gazing about like what we could do, until we were able to pull in somebody from another project who is an activist in the space, and we didn't know it, but she knows everybody in LA that's doing, doing 3D printing of masks, because that's kind of what we figured out. We'd like maybe make a resource for people doing that. And before we could even say, oh yeah, well, we'll provide this, she's like, no, that already exists, and she just basically started like, knocking down all of the chess pieces we had set up, and then giving us like an education about the space of the makerspace in Los Angeles, and how people connect with each other for emergency needs, and how to do all that so that we could proceed in a more rational space. But you can't recruit those people when the crisis is happening. You have to recruit them into the organization before the crisis, so that they, those people who are the connectors, who do know everybody in the community and can give you the landscape quickly. You could do it yourself if you have time, but not in emergency situations.
Any other questions or I have one in the queue, but we've got about 5 more minutes. Okay. Yeah, the other question is communicating these principles to partner organizations, and just like kind of a same spin on the communicating to projects or project leads. But is there anything different about how you might communicate that, and especially if they might be joining you or seeing you as like gonna fix a lot of problems for them? Does that make sense?
Yeah, Greg, I don't know if you have any specific thoughts on this. I have found that, well, there's a couple ways I think that you can do that. From the Brigade side, I have started on our Brigades demo nights, incorporating a link to the 17 principles for environmental justice that were shared with me and my team by our project partner. So we're working with a local West Oakland nonprofit that is a very grassroots community-based nonprofit. And when I first started, I sort of inherited this project lead role. And when I started showing up, I think there was a lot of skepticism and, essentially, here's another white girl coming in telling us she's going to fix our world with computers, and that's really not how our world operates. That was one of the first things she shared with me, was this document. And it's like one of the first links on our GitHub repo, and it's I've now added it to our demo night presentations, and I think that's one really just basic way. Just make it visible, and don't be afraid to ask people questions about it. I think that from a project partner perspective, I'm somebody who tends to be a little bit more outspoken, so I'm always hesitant to give advice around like, it's easy, just raise the issue. But I find questions help. So if you come with questions, people tend to be a little bit less, put up a little bit less of a barrier. But Greg, I don't know if you have, just in your experience specifically, particularly working with on the principles with the various groups that you worked with, sort of what that process looked like in terms of bringing people in, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I won't talk much. What I've learned after like almost a decade of doing this work is just like deep humility is so important to be able to actually be useful. And it has been a total flip from how can we solve problems in these communities to how can I help these people who are solving the problems. And that is a total flip. You don't end up with many apps on the end of that flip. You end up with like helping people use spreadsheets better. Like and I think the historical record backs that up, is like, it hasn't really worked all that much. And so we should be humble to that. And you can still help a whole lot by remaining humble to the fact that actually your technology is not going to go all that far, and just sit in community with people and find a way to be useful.
Thank you so much for that. We've got Isaac and Ben as well with their hands up. Let's go to Isaac.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so over the last few years, I've been doing some stuff with DISCA. It's the Defense Support of Civil Authorities. So it's like how you deploy military assets and personnel to assist in missions that are normally for like civil authorities. One of the things I think a lot of people don't realize is that people step on each other's toes all the time when these things happen. So when the military sends helicopter assets to go lift, stuff and bring, supplies to other people, you're like taking away somebody else's job who, they were allocated the responsibility to actually deliver these supplies, and the military just comes in and Rambos and pretends like they're like saving the day, but it actually like steps on other people's toes. And so a lot of this stuff has to be deconflicted. Most of these organizations, they already have org charts. They already have rosters set up ahead of time for all their operations. So for us to actually, you know, get into their ecosystem and be able to help them, we cannot be building the relationships when the disaster is already happening. These rosters need to be pre-planned long before, right? Like we need to be building these relationships before the disasters happen, before the pandemic happens, before the hurricane happens. So I think a lot of these organizations, a lot of us in the brigades, we need to be building our social capital. And so, sorry, did I disappear?
No,
No,
you're
still here.
good.
So the
Lots
social
of
capital
snaps.
needs to be built ahead of time, so that like we need to be building relationships with, you know, food banks, FBI, you know, whatever organizations are in that ecosystem. So I just wanted to put that out there because I've seen many times in which, you know, as we're drilling, as we're, you know, doing the same exercises thousands and thousands of times, we're drilling to an exact scenario. And so when someone comes in and actually interrupts that, it throws the whole thing off. And then the communication chain just kind of gets distorted when there's another actor who is doing a process differently than the way people have been trained. So that's all I had to add.
Great. We are at time. This is a good conversation. I wish we had a little bit more time. Let's bring it to the COVID Slack channel. So if anybody wants to start a thread on this topic in particular, maybe we can share some of the links there. And then reminder, there's also some links in the Google Doc. And yes, the recording will be made available after the fact, pretty soon.
Yeah. And it will be on the discourse post, and we'll also post information on that. So, yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks everyone for all your work. It's awesome to see these projects.
Bye.
Bye.